This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you may have missed this morning, but we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 1st of September 2020 and I am 2J.
I am JM.
And I am GK. Happy new month, everybody. This is the 9th month. It is also known as a month of birthing and increase. So,
really?
Yes.
All right.
Let's have a look at our headlines. In the Daily Nation, BBI, UHURU, RAILA plan to corner RUTO. In the Standard, RUTO's big gamble. And in the Star, cracks rock churches ahead of referendum. Let us begin with the Daily Nation. What is UHURU and RAILA's plan?
So, President Kenyatta and ODM leader Raila Odinga are canvassing support from religious leaders in their bid to support the planned referendum amidst opposition from the Deputy President. We're told that the teams that were set up before COVID-19, regional campaign teams, are set to be reconstituted once the BBI report has been handed over to the principals. And top on the list of priorities is to debunk the notion that a referendum is not possible, that constitutional change is not necessary. What I will say, by way of preparedness, I think the government is not as prepared because there's a referendum bill that is still cooking. However, having said that, if we decide to do this through the route of popular initiative, then it's really all systems go. Signatures can be marshaled, and very sooner rather than later, the bill will go into Parliament and to MCAs in Parliament, and then to the people. And before 2022. We will have a referendum.
You've called it.
There is something very interesting Daily Nation points out. It says, DP said the BBI document was taken back and we don't know whether it will come the way it was or it will be altered. And I think there's been some weird issues with transparency when it comes to everything from the handshake to BBI, which need to be resolved if Kenyans are gonna buy into this idea. Shall we park it?
Yes,
now?
park it, yes.
Let's look at the Standard, and the Standard is saying RUTO's big gamble. Now, the question here is to oppose or not. It says the DP's words and actions betray a man hell-bent on opposing the upcoming constitutional referendum. But is this a smart political move? His critics think otherwise, and others are daring him to be brave and bold and show his true colors. Now, my feeling is that the DP should not just oppose for opposing's sake.
Yes.
I think if you're going to oppose BBI, I think you need to have your own credible alternative. So that Kenyans can say, are we doing this? Or do we want this other one? And I think he should go back to his speech of Chatham House when he was there in London in 2019, and he outlined what he would want should there be any kind of constitutional change. So his was to maintain a pure presidential system and then create a sort of substantial role for the political opposition and make the deputy president the head of government business, things of that nature. But the idea there is to create a debate, not just to say no for saying
no sake. Yeah, of course.
And so the Standard outlines how DP has occupied the no stance in previous referendum votes. In 2005, when he joined Orange, the Orange team, and in 2010, when again he opposed the constitution. He lost then, but the Standard says that this gave him political currency. And he stood with the church again in this time. And so I think that goes into the Star.
I think for me, the irony in all of this is he's making so much noise and he's stopping the public from hearing the real benefits that are, within BBI. And I think, GK, you were making this point. What BBI is trying to do is to create inclusivity, to create more seats, more space for everyone.
By expanding the executive.
Yes, the current presidential system we have is very exclusive.
So which one is selfish?
Exactly, which one is selfish? I think that's the point.
There's a false narrative there, you're right. Because Ruto had said that this new expansion will benefit a few selfish individuals. However, I'm like, president is one, executive has many.
Several, precisely.
Okay, so let's park the big gamble.
Exactly. And in the Star, we're talking about the cracks in the church. And the Star, I really enjoyed this article. They're outlining how, in contrast to the 2010 constitutional change movement, where the church was united, all factions of the church, we have some differences we're seeing now. And we're seeing how all the different church bits are not united. And the Star is telling us that these differences are likely to trigger a groundswell of confusion amongst followers, which I completely agree with. And so they're saying that these divergent views could create issue with creating national consensus. And so they outline, for example, how the Catholic Church has 33% of the country in terms of, the religious divisions.
Yeah.
And so I think this could be a very interesting thing. I think that a lot of the time we know that the church is on the ground a lot of the time. And if you have divisions in the church, that could
translate back up.
Yeah, exactly. Could translate to a lot of issues as you get up to the top.
I wonder why the church is so enamored by the deputy president. I missed this. Anyway, we have a 3-part criteria that we will use to break down those 3 headlines. We will ask ourselves, were they topical or speculative? Were they repetitive or groundbreaking? Were they thoughtful or just plain lazy? I want to say that the Star...
Good story, not so
but
good
also
headline.
a bit speculative.
Yes.
I'm not convinced yet that the churches have these cracks, or that they may. So I'm not convinced of that. The Standard I like because he does have a big gamble. Should he say he's opposing it and it works against him in 2022, that will be a huge loss for him. And then we have the Daily Nation. So who do we give it to?
I think we give it to the Standard.
I like that idea of the big gamble.
There we go. It's topical. There we go. And interesting. Onto the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country, where we also have a 3-part criteria. We ask ourselves, is it humorous or dry? Is it satirical or pessimistic? And is it effective or just plain lazy? There was no standard cartoon, I'm to believe, but we can start with the Daily Nation.
Yes, so today's cartoon is one of the Constitution of Kenya, opened at chapter 6 on leadership and integrity. However, the Constitution has a big gaping hole in it, with the legs of 3 persons going through it on the opposite side to the footsteps. There are several other footprints having passed that way as well. And the caption reads, "KEMSA's scandal and the loophole that works." So a fairly pessimistic cartoon. The context here is the KEMSA scandal, and it's suggesting that the top leadership at the Ministry of Health at KEMSA as well have a lot of questions to answer regarding the tenders, and they're basically saying that these are people whose morals and integrity are in question at the moment. I mean, just as a throwaway comment, I think that chapter 6 on leadership and integrity is a throwaway chapter in and of itself. But also, I think that it would be unfair to not really learn where to place the blame. I think that Kenyans need to understand the kinds of things that are required that go into building a case against someone. And I think a lot of the time we have blamed the DCI because they come with flimsy charges, flimsy evidence. So I think, maybe those are some of the places that we should be looking at as well. So.
All right, so that end to end there's justice.
Yes.
If we move to the Star, we have a caricature of Mutahi Kagwe there, and it looks like his pants are on fire. But then we also have someone with a PPE coronavirus suit saying you may have been exposed. And the gun there, instead of temperature, is saying it's a KEMSA probe. Contact tracing. And the contact tracing is facing the CS of Health. And this is, I think, coming after the CEO of KEMSA, Jona Monjari, saying, they got some pressure from up above when it came to these tenders. So pointing his gun towards the CS there. I thought it was funny.
It is funny.
Okay,
I like it.
Can we give it to the Star for being humorous?
Give it to the Star, exactly, as opposed to the
Absolutely.
There we have
pessimism.
it. Star gives us our winning cartoon. And now for our final thought. But before we get there, please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
And now our final thought. This week we are looking at some of the world's most famous cliches and phrases and examining to see whether they hold up. So today's phrase is "diamonds are forever." And inspired by that phrase, the book today is Brilliance and Fire, a biography of diamonds by Rochelle Bergstein. So diamonds weren't previously always forever. And even though these diamonds or these sparkling gemstones occupy a very specific culture in our today, we know that they have become symbols of commitment, of wealth, and of belonging. But that did not happen by chance. The myth of the diamond has actually been very carefully crafted and constructed over the course of the past century. And the history of the gemstone itself is much more complicated. So this book is a very lively cultural biography of diamonds, which explores our society's obsession with them and the real world characters who have made them since. So we do recognize this phrase, "a diamond is forever." But who actually gave us this catchphrase? Where do these gemstones and their complicated legacies originate? And how did they become a symbol of our culture's engagement and marriage status? And why have they retained their coveted status symbol throughout the centuries? So this book is a way to understand how diamonds have captivated mostly Western culture from the late 19th century. And the book spends most of its time untangling the intricate ways in which diamonds have been discovered, mined, and marketed to the public. So it's not so much a science book about diamonds, but the marketing and advertising around it. So just some facts. Diamonds are the world's, and specifically Africa's, major natural resource. An estimated $13 billion worth of diamonds are produced every single year. Wow. And 65% of that comes from Africa alone. And we know that diamonds have two main uses, jewelry, but also industrial purposes. And I was surprised to learn that only 30% of diamonds are actually used for jewelry. The other 70% goes into industrial use. And 20% of diamonds are blood diamonds. And so these are diamonds that come from war zones or are used to fuel conflict. And we know, of course, a lot of that originates in Africa. So I think many people may know that the De Beers Company has been for many years the most prominent name in diamonds. They are actually a monopoly. And so up until the mid-1800s, diamonds were very rare, and you'd see them normally on the hands or the crowns of monarchs. But then you had this diamond rush in South Africa in the late 19th century, and this ended up flooding the diamond market, which then reduced demand because it wasn't as rare as it was before. And so the story of De Beers starts with English-born businessman Cecil Rhodes, which we all know, who broke into the diamond business in South Africa. So a lot of the time what you have with diamond mining is that you'll have lots of little groups coming together to kind of like carry the weight. But what happened is that Cecil Rhodes then went and bought up all these tiny little smaller groups in order to form one large one. And so he then has the monopoly in South Africa. And then the Rhodes people then decided to create these distribution arms. So they were controlling every facet of the supply and demand process. So they had this thing called the Diamond Syndicate. You had the Diamond Trading Company in London and the Diamond Syndicate in Israel. And so by the time Rhodes dies in 1902, the De Beers Company controls 90% of the global production of diamonds and distribution in the world. And so eventually in the 1930s, you see this decline in the demand for diamonds. And so the De Beers Company decide to turn the diamond idea on its head. And they create this campaign, "A diamond is forever." That's actually where it came from. And so through this advertising, you see men being convinced that they need to buy diamonds for their women. You see movies convincing people that diamonds are a girl's best friend, which came from Gentlemen Prefer Blondes in 1953. And so this was known as the most successful advertising campaign in 1947. But of course it has come, not without its own fair share of scandals. And she says in the book, I'll end with this, that these flawless gems are scarred by nastier associations that have surfaced in recent years. Geological devastation, slave labor, disrupted indigenous populations, and unthinkable violence. It's no wonder that even though diamonds are in fashion, it's not terribly fashionable to like diamonds.
And so let me just talk a little bit about how they navigated the turbulent period immediately after the Great Depression in the late 1930s as they went into the 1940s. So the De Beers Company managed to survive World War I, which was a turbulent time. It also managed to survive the Great Depression, which started in the 1920s. And it did so through the leadership of a man named Ernest Oppenheimer. But at the height of the Great Depression in the mid-1930s, they realized that to survive, they had to think without the box on how to sustain demand for diamonds. And so some fresh blood emerged. In 1938, the author tells us, Harry Oppenheimer, who was Ernest Oppenheimer's son, an intellectual, 29 years old, who had recently joined the family business, traveled to New York to see the prospects of the American market. And so the idea was to, penetrate this market and sell more of their diamonds. And so in New York, he met with another young businessman named Gerald Locke, a Yale graduate, we're told, a newly minted advertising executive who was hungry to make a name for himself. Locke worked at NWA & Son, Amongst the clients was Goodyear Tires, also Haynes Knitwear, both companies that are still surviving and thriving in America today. But the challenge for Locke was that rather than selling a brand, he had to sell a product, because at this point it wasn't really the brand; it was the product, diamonds themselves as a gemstone, and they were competing against pearls, which had gained quite a bit of currency popularity against other gemstones. And so at that point, they also realized that the younger generation did not have as much of the up-and-coming generation at that time did not have as much of an affinity towards diamonds. And so the obvious step would have been to hire beautiful young women and drape them in jewels, but they decided to choose an unconventional path. So they decided on a 4-point framework after doing their research on the market. Number one, they decided that one of the objectives behind their campaign would be to protect and encourage the engagement ring tradition. And the engagement ring tradition was born out of the idea that a young woman has to wear a diamond ring. Number two, restore diamonds and diamond jewelry to a position of importance in the world of fashion. So during the First World War and before that, diamonds had been quite prominent as a preferred jewel. And then number three, increase the sales of all types of diamond jewelry in the general luxury market in competition with other luxury items like gemstones and pearls. And then number four, to educate the public on diamond sizes and prices. So when they did their research, they also found that compared to the First World War, during this other time, men would go into the jewelry stores to look for the rings alone without their partners.
Significant others.
Yeah, and so they found that sometimes they'd go in and they'd be puzzled about why a diamond, how much does it cost, and so on and so forth. And so they put all that together. They built a very successful campaign that revitalized the importance of diamonds in the context of marriage and proposals and what have you. And so in the years between 1939 and 1941, when they did their first campaign, diamond sales rose by 55%. In the United States.
Wow.
And I believe after this is when the campaign on A Diamond is Forever and what have you came up and have really dominated the world's market.
Interesting.
So it was all marketing.
Yeah, and there's a rule. I think you're only supposed to spend, is it 2 months of your salary?
Yes,
or
2
3
months salary,
months? Or it gives you a nice little parameter there. But I mean, the downside of diamonds are forever is the conflict that has surrounded this little gem, this expensive gem. And so we had blood diamonds, as they were called, fueling conflict in places like Angola. You had the Uniter Party, who sort of took over after the colonialists left, and then wreaked havoc and were basically fueled by selling these blood diamonds. And there's a famous story of Sierra Leone in the 1990s where RUF, the Revolutionary United Front, crosses from the Liberian border, creates dissatisfaction with the existing regime, and then gave Sierra Leoneans the impression that it wanted to capture the mines for the benefit of the people. Little did they know, RUF had set its sights on these mines to basically fuel its armies, buy AK-47s, and selling these diamonds ensured the supply of these weapons. And so as RUF integrates more and more into the political landscape of Sierra Leone at that time, they took over the Kono district, which was like the diamond district. And they also employed really violent and gruesome tactics. So from this sale of diamonds to the rest of the world, you find that the rise of child soldiers in Sierra Leone really went up. And there's a really beautiful book I read a long time ago called A Long Way Gone, Memoirs of a Boy Soldier, written by Ishmael Beer. And he chronicles how RUF took them in, gave them drugs, and basically made them slaves to these diamond mines and stuff like that. But also the film, Blood Diamond, does a really good job of just highlighting how interconnected into the global chain these blood diamonds really were. And so to sort of stop all this, the Kimberley process came about. Now the Kimberley process started when Southern African diamond producing states met in Kimberley, South Africa, a place in South Africa, in the year 2000, and they tried to find ways to stop the conflict diamonds from being traded. And so in 2002, they came up with the Kimberley Process Certification Scheme. So now when you go and buy a diamond, it must have a certificate, a grade, and all that stuff. And the industry's determination to classify and isolate the different types of diamonds boils down to two separate things. One, to protect the commercial value of the product, and two, to preserve the idea that stones are inherently special. Now, this leads into this whole diamonds are forever thing.
Yes.
There's a reason why people still want this diamond. What they're saying is, or the author calls it, is the diamond dream. That diamonds are not just pretty, shiny things, but they're also symbols of love, desire, and affluence. Now, that last one, affluence, is a big one, because as China and Asia's middle class grew, so did the appetite for diamonds. And like Jeremy, you're saying, that idea of the engagement, although it's old in its idea, is still perpetuated today, even now. And so it thrives on this thing that they call the status anxiety, the middle class aspiration. You really want to fit in. You want to give your girl a diamond, and this is the only way you know how to show her that she is worthy. But there's a behavior change now. People are starting to be more conscious of where did our diamonds come from, making sure you have a certificate. I think you can't even get insured unless you have a diamond certificate. So really interesting book. So on a day where we had a winning headline from the Standard, winning cartoon from the Star, I want to leave you with this quote. A diamond is a luminous crystal ball in which the forecasted future isn't objective, but rather a manifestation of our own needs and our deepest desires, the image we want to see. And that's what makes the little stone so potent. It's beautiful, and that beauty stimulates our imaginations and lets us bask in the prism of possibilities. No matter what we learn to be true about the stone, we all, deep down, like getting lost in our own reflections. A diamond is a tiny mirror. It helps us do just that. So have a lovely evening. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Find us on TV. We're on GoTV. Time for you to air.